Executive Suite with WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi.
Superstorm Sandy hit waterfront businesses hard.
The concrete steps that, that Mother Ocean took away from us.
And many experts warn it could be just the beginning, which means coastal states need to prepare for the possibility of more and more severe weather. Few places face bigger risks than the ocean state. Right now, most companies are focused on recovery, but some are already starting to think ahead to the next big storm. This week on Executive Suite, the latest on the cleanup and the resources available to help with the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Emergency Management Agency, Theresa Murray, and risk management expert, Donna Childs. Welcome to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi. Donna Childs will be joining me on the second half, but for the first half, I welcome Theresa Murray. She leads the Rhode Island Emergency Management Agency. And Theresa, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Let's start with the basics. How bad was Sandy, and where do things stand right now with the cleanup in Rhode Island?
Sandy was very difficult along all of our south coastal communities. Block Island especially had damage along those areas. We're very fortunate that the storm was not worse than we experienced. And if we look at a direct hit that they had in New York and New Jersey, many more homes and businesses would have been impacted, and we'd be still looking for folks and dealing with that. So we're very fortunate.
And there's no reason that couldn't happen here. It's really just about the storm track, right?
It's the storm track, the severity of the storm, and now our coastline has been altered as a result of the storm. Dunes that protected many homes down in Mesquamacut, also in Charlestown, the dunes are no longer. The wind blew them away. So that changes the flood zones affecting the properties in those areas, businesses, anything that's further up from the tide area.
So Sandy creates a new set of risks to homes that were protected this time that might not be next time?
Correct, and also businesses.
Businesses as well.
Depending on, again, the storm that's approaching, surge, winds, etc.
How many businesses were affected? Did you see a lot of businesses in those areas?
On Mesquamacut Beach, there were a lot of small businesses all along that beach area, restaurants that were impacted. Obviously, the roads were closed all along that shoreline road. There was probably about 4 feet of sand in the roadway, at a minimum 4 feet, that had to be excavated out with front-end loaders. And
then, of course, for others, there's power loss, even if they're further inland.
Any storm event has a risk with winds, ice, of causing power outages. So that's something that can impact any store, whether it's a small mom and pop, a gas station, or a large business. Those are issues that many of the larger companies will put generators in place so that they have that available.
So when this might be a time where people are actually paying attention more than they might be otherwise to the ideas about disaster prep, what you do in an emergency. If you think of the businesses you saw, was there anything that might have protected them a little more if they'd taken that step, or was there something some businesses did that gave them a leg up on others in terms of dealing with the fallout from the storm?
I think for the businesses along the coastline, the steps that they could have taken, if your structure is gone, the integrity of your building, you'd have to have an alternate place to set up business. And most small businesses don't really have that in the works. But if they have all of their data stored, they have their employees with a business continuity plan in place, then they could start up business in another location temporarily until their current structure is restored, or they take mitigation steps to prevent it from being flooded the next time.
Data storage, and obviously you'd probably recommend they don't just have it on a hard drive there in the same place it gets flooded. You want it in the cloud or something, right?
Whether they use the cloud or they deal with a professional to have a backup storage facility, that all of their records, particularly anything dealing with personally identifiable information of their clients, that all of that is stored somewhere so they can recapture that and begin business as soon as possible.
Whole team working on that. You mentioned to me off air, the Rhode Island Cyber Disruption Team. What is that?
Rhode Island Cyber Disruption Team is run by the Rhode Island State Police. We coordinated, REMA coordinated the creation of that with the State Police. And there's a team of folks that go and they do a lot of outreach efforts to businesses. We've coordinated with the Division of Business Regulation to reach all of their clients, if you will, to talk to them about continuity planning, ensuring that they update their software, their hardware, that people have a plan to work remotely in the event of a disaster. Their employees know that plan, they practice that plan, they have call trees to make sure they can contact their employees. But that team's available. They will be at our conference. We have a business continuity conference that REMA's sponsoring November 15th, and we encourage all small businesses to attend that conference. They can go to our website at rema.rhodeisland.gov, and they'll have information on there under the Business Emergency Operations Center. And the cyber disruption team representatives will be making a presentation and giving tips on what to do for businesses.
Another speaker will be our second guest, right? Donna Childs will be
She
there
will be.
next week. I'm sure she'll be talking
Yes.
more about that in a few minutes. I've got to ask you about climate change. I don't want to get into a debate about the science of whether Sandy was caused by it or anything else, but we do
Right.
see clear evidence in Rhode Island of erosion in our beaches and rising sea levels. How much does that concern you in terms of Rhode Island's, how much risk Rhode Island is facing in future decades, maybe, especially on its coastline or where the bay is?
There are people that are far more knowledgeable in that area to speak to that. Our job at REMA is to plan for it and coordinate with them. We have to be ready at REMA for ever-changing events that could happen, whether all of a sudden we start having more tornadoes, earthquakes we're seeing more frequently up north here from as opposed to out west in California.
Zombie apocalypse, maybe.
Yeah, one of those. But we have to be prepared for everything, and there's always something new, which keeps this job very interesting for my staff. But we have to make people aware of all these possible events that can happen. Climate change, we are seeing differences, but we certainly have had far more severe storms in our history in the state. Going back 1938, Carol, Bob had a big impact as well. This one, this storm here, Sandy, certainly posed a threat equal to that of Carol and Bob. The Weather Service told us that before it hit here, but we were fortunate that it went further south for the eye.
Could we have another 1938 here, or is the fact that we would be more prepared and have more warning mean it wouldn't be nearly as devastating?
We saw homes lost on the coastline with this storm, the hurricane of 38. Certainly we'd do more to evacuate and be more prepared and be able to reach people hopefully far more effectively than in that period of time. But the threat is there. I mean, there have been many articles that we are so overdue in this area. We've been very fortunate, so I wouldn't rule out anything.
What's the most basic thing everyone at home should know about preparing for disaster? If there's one thing you could leave people with about whether they're thinking about their home, their business, what should people have on hand or have at the ready? What's the number one?
Number one is every supply necessary for 72 hours. Whether it's a business, you need to have supplies for your employees. If they're stranded at your business for whatever the incident may be, you need to have basic supplies of water and some sort of food substance there. Battery-powered radio, because it may be the only way to get information if the phone service is down. Also, battery-powered lighting. They intend to or try to steer you away from candles so you don't have another disaster like a fire on top of one that we're already dealing with.
Interesting. So you actually it's better to have a battery-powered light than to have candles like we all imagined
Yes,
from the
and they
past.
have battery-powered lanterns now. So at a minimum, back in 38, they were using probably hurricane lamps that were used with oil and kerosene stoves, and we tend to get away from those things now. So you want to think about generators for individual homes, for businesses, small businesses, thinking about having generator power, at least for the essentials. For those people that have special needs, if they're using life-sustaining devices, they want to register with the Rhode Island Special Needs Registry. That information's on our website. If they use oxygen or they use other types of life-sustaining equipment, they need to let the National Grid or their power companies know that. They have registrations for that so that they are aware that that needs to be restored as soon as possible.
And your website again for people at home, riema.ri.gov.
Correct.
Got to ask you, what keeps you up at night? what's your biggest concern as the person in charge of emergency management in Rhode Island?
It's the unknown. Much as you said, we try to prepare for the zombie apocalypse. There's always something new that people are creating. Certainly, we've seen terrorist efforts in this country. You wonder whether we're fully prepared for that. And there's some things that we take the best steps we can, but it's always that area of surprise. So I'd like to say the staff is working very hard to be prepared for everything that could encounter the state. But there's always a surprise.
Those unknown unknowns, as Donald Rumsfeld once famously said, yeah.
We'll go with that.
We'll go with that. All right, well, we have to take a break. I want to thank Theresa Murray for being here with me on the first half. A very busy couple of weeks here for RN EMA. And more on disaster preparedness after the break. Stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi. Joining me now is Donna Childs. She's founder and CEO of Prepare, a risk management firm, and author of, and she has the book right here, if you could hold it up for our viewers, Prepare for the Worst, Plan for the Best, and gives you a clear idea of what she's thinking about in terms of disaster prep. Before we dive into to what we're going to talk about today, just give people a very quick snapshot of your background. Why do you think about this? Part of why you're here, you're actually Rhode Island native, but that's not where you first thought about this stuff a lot.
I know. I was a reinsurance executive. I was based in Zurich, Switzerland, and I worked for the Swiss Reinsurance Company. And
for people who aren't familiar, that's a huge reinsurance company, Swiss Re.
It's a global leader, and what reinsurance companies do is they basically backstop the primary insurance company. So in the world of reinsurance, either nothing happens or something really, really bad happens, and very little in between. And Swiss Re underwrites both property, casualty, and life health risks. So I looked at business continuity and risk management issues on a daily basis, and that really was critical when I found myself literally at ground zero on 9/11. My office was located very close to the World Trade Center.
And you saw that day, clearly you were already working in that area, and it had a real effect on you in terms of thinking, wow, there's more people can do, and they need to do it to get ready.
Yeah, I was in the World Trade Center when the plane struck the towers and made it home, and lost access to my home for some months and my office for a week. And what I learned as the months wore on is that I was a statistical outlier in terms of understanding risk management, and that's why it's so important that we get these lessons out there to small businesses, because a lot of these losses are avoidable.
And one of the reasons you're here, and Theresa Murray previewed it for us, there is going to be a free business continuity conference. You'll be speaking there. That's next Thursday, November 15th, 8 a.m., Kirkbrake Country Club in Lincoln. People can register online, riema.ri.gov. And I want to hear from you first. What do you think of what Theresa Murray said? Did that sound like similar lessons as you'd give to people?
It did, and I think we have kind of a complementary perspective. Theresa with her government experience and me with my business and small business experience. One of the comments Theresa made was that small businesses are challenged because they don't necessarily have another place to go when the disaster strikes. Given the resource constraints for small businesses, it's just not cost effective to lease redundant office space. And these are the kinds of things that small businesses deal with. How do you balance safety and continuity needs with very real limitations on your resources?
Now I want to go to the skepticism too. People might say, well, she has a book, this is her business, it's sort of in her interest to prep us up and get us a little scared about what's going to happen like that. What's your pitch on why? And maybe they say, I'm not in Matunic, I'm in Cumberland, so I'm going to be fine. What's your pitch to someone like that?
Well, actually, it's not my business. I was in a completely unrelated line of work when I started my first business, and I just realized it was extremely lucky that I had this background or I would be out of business. So this was actually a charitable project for me for the last decade that I did on the side. Prepare, I just started recently to focus on this full time because I think my experience can motivate small businesses. And what I would say to the skeptics is, I agree with you. I think fear-mongering is counterproductive, and that's why I don't talk about catastrophic imagery like hurricanes and tornadoes and terrorist attacks, because thankfully most of us won't experience them. But everyone will experience human error. Everyone will experience a service interruption. Everyone will experience a hardware or some other type of equipment failure. And if you prepare for those everyday disasters, you will be better prepared against a more imminent threat at a more reasonable cost. And in the process of doing that, you're going to be more prepared for the more serious threat. So for example, somebody trips over a cable and causes your computer network to crash. You're going to need a backup to recover your data. So human error, someone mistakenly deletes a file, you're going to need that backup. Well, that's the same backup you're going to need if you're displaced because of a hurricane or something worse. So think about the everyday disaster, and that's a more pragmatic approach.
Could sound overwhelming to people. I could imagine, you know, it's tough to run a small business. There's everything's on your shoulders, from maybe interfacing with customers to making the payroll. And I think, wow, to have backups for this and you know, extra place to go with that. You know, how much what's the feasible argument to you there? What's the smaller steps people could take to make this seem like manageable, to get themselves as ready as they can?
I think there are 2 points of advice that I would want to offer to your viewers and to all small businesses. And the first is, you're correct. If you're asking your employees and your staff to pitch in and work on disaster readiness and business continuity, that's an extra thing for them to do, and they're already overworked. We're all overworked. But one way to sell this is to show them how the methodology that you're implementing in your business can be brought home to make their families and homes more safe. So, for example, if you're taking photographs of your key assets, you might encourage the employees to take the digital camera home and take photographs of their assets at home and document for insurance purposes. If you're making a communications plan, you might encourage your employees to do the same for their schools, their children, for their families. And that really gets buy-in because they see how we're all going to be safer and we're all going to be more resilient. So instead of a burden of another thing to do, it's something that's going to benefit everyone at home and at work. And the second thing that I would say is that while thankfully most people won't experience these types of catastrophic disasters, being ready for them is a real tool for competitive advantage. For example, many of the Fortune 500 companies, as part of their business continuity planning, are evaluating the resilience of their supply chains. And their due diligence on prospective vendors explicitly considers their ability or how credible they are to make their deliverables in the event of a disruption. A small business that's prepared is more competitive to win that contract, grow the revenues, and grow employment. So I see this as a business development tool, as a source of business competitive advantage. That's the way I think it's a little bit more saleable to a skeptical small business person who already has enough to do.
Good argument, an interesting one. I actually hadn't heard that before. We're going to talk much more about this. We have to take a quick break, but Donna Childs will be sticking with me here on Executive Suite. Stick with us to learn more about how to be ready. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nisi. We're talking disaster prep with Donna Childs. She's the author of this book, Prepare for the Worst, Plan for the Best, and she's a Rhode Island native who saw 9/11 firsthand in New York and what that could mean. You were telling me off air that actually the plan that helped you get through 9/11 as a business person was not, you didn't plan for the World Trade Centers to come down.
No, I certainly, when I was thinking about what would be the worst case scenario I would ever encounter, I could not have imagined something on the scope and scale of what happened on the World Trade Center that morning. And my thinking at that time was the worst thing that could happen would be a fire at the nearby Wall Street subway station, because I would lose access to my office for days or even longer. And so I was thinking about, interruption, disruption, what would I do if I had to work remotely? And so the plan I put in place, though, was sufficient to get me through the unimaginable. So even the basic things that you can do can really tip the balance in your favor.
When you're watching coverage of Sandy, the impact here in Rhode Island, even more so, as Theresa mentioned, in New York and New Jersey, what comes to mind to you because of your expertise in this, saying, oh, I just wish I could have talked to these people beforehand, because if they'd done X, they might be a little better prepared, or here's something that everyone should be thinking about, that you can see the lesson there? I
think what's so frustrating to me, and that's the reason why I launched the second venture, is that there's no national learning that's taking place here. And when we experienced after 9/11 in terms of disaster relief and preparedness wasn't new to us. It may have gotten a lot more media attention because it's New York, but there's very little that we experienced that small businesses that were affected by Hurricane Andrew in Florida didn't experience, that small businesses in Northern California affected by the Northridge earthquake didn't experience. We're repeating the same lessons all over again. And again, with Katrina in New Orleans, a lot of their recovery issues post-disaster were similar to what we had. And that's why I wrote the book, and this started as a charitable activity for 10 years, because it's just too painful and it's too costly in terms of human costs and financial costs.
So the details of the events are unpredictable, but a lot of the impacts, in your view, they are predictable. The same issues come up each time, whether it's a terrorist attack, God forbid, or a different type of hurricane or tropical storm Irene.
Well, the result is beyond the scope of your control, but the process is within the scope of your control. When 9/11 happened, I can tell you that morning I was in a boat with my neighbor and his dog, that the New Jersey State Police grabbed every boat that they could, and they brought us from the Hudson River across to New Jersey, where I stayed for a few months because my community was closed. And it was eerie, the sense of calm that I felt. And the reason I think I had that calm was I knew I did what I could. There's nothing that I could have done that I could go back and say. And regret is a painful thing to live with. Just for peace of mind, that's something.
Particularly if you get there and you say, oh, there's just a few small things I didn't make the time for. So it's a good segue to, when you go to the Business Continuity Conference again next Thursday at Kirkbrake, people can sign up free on the REMO website. What are some of the big lessons you're going to try to hit home to people at that?
The big lessons that I really want to drive home are this is really a tool to make your business more competitive, more resilient, and more profitable. We talked before the break about becoming more competitive to win corporate contracts by showing you're resilient, you're a more reliable, dependable supplier. There are other benefits. You can reduce your commercial insurance costs. You can demonstrate to your risk carrier that you're a better risk and you should have a lower premium as a result. That's right away money in your pocket. That's right away a positive return on investment. Why wouldn't you do it? I can also show how you can improve your business processes and make your business run more efficiently. Because in order to do really good preparedness, you have to understand how well your business works. And a lot of us surprisingly don't. We don't know what the key drivers of value are. But this process forces you to confront that.
Let's say someone gave you one of those TLC shows where you have a half hour to do a big project. In this case, they're going to send you into a business and you have to, as quickly as you can, get them ready for a disaster. What's the first thing you hit when you get in there? I
would ask them, what's the key driver of value for your business? And I would predict that their answer would be wrong, and it would be kind of embarrassing, and it's a good thing TLC is taped so they can edit it out. But seriously, one of the examples I use is that there was a software company in the World Trade Center, and they received a $25 million slug of venture capital from a major news media company to develop applications that would go on the terminals that feed traders and so forth. Now, what did they do for preparedness? Well, they insured their property. So when the World Trade Center burned down, the insurance company paid them for the office furniture, the computers, and all the hardware that went. But that wasn't the value of the business.
It was their intellectual property.
It was their intellectual property. It was the hundreds of thousands of lines of software code that they had written. That's what they should have protected first, after human safety. So if they would have backed up that code, they'd still be in business. The furniture, that's all, you can get that later. That's what they needed to do.
And that code was gone.
And that code was gone. And they're not getting another $25 million slug. So they were looking at risk from an old, out-of-date paradigm that loss equals physical damage. It doesn't. We're in a service-based economy. Loss equals intellectual property. Loss equals pedestrian access if you're running a restaurant. Loss equals all kinds of things. Many of the small businesses in Lower Manhattan that failed after 9/11 didn't sustain physical damage.
Of course, because there's so many service sector, and we have a lot of service sector here in Rhode Island as well. So your bio says you consult for the United Nations International Strategy for Disaster Reduction. Sounds frighteningly important. What is that?
Well, disasters, we're thinking about disasters in the United States as a developed country, but disasters are really a key priority on the development agenda. Think about a single event like the earthquake in Haiti or the floods in China where they had to evacuate 1 million people. That can reverse years or decades of economic and development gains made by the very poorest people who don't have access to insurance or other types of social protections. And so reducing disaster risk is a key priority for lifting people out of poverty.
Real quickly, 15 seconds left. Do you see real risks in Rhode Island? Is this a place that faces some real risks?
I think it's a place that faces some real risk, and I think that this could be a source of competitive advantage. Rhode Island moved from number 35 to 10 in the rankings for access to capital. If Rhode Island can address risk management, insurance becomes more affordable. I think Rhode Island will move from 10 to the top 3.
All right, well, some optimistic advice there at the end. Again, the Business Continuity Conference next Thursday at Kirkbrake Country Club. You can sign up for free on the RIMA website. It's all the time we have. I want to thank Donna Childs, and my guest on the first half was Theresa Murray, Executive Director of RIMA. Donna's book, Prepare for the Worst, Plan for the Best, advice we can all take to heart. If you missed this show or any other, catch it on WPRI.com. See you next week.